The stars outside the eclipse flickered like dying embers. The ship, a relic from humanity's last desperate attempt to hold back the Exarath, limped through space. It was a warship, but now it was little more than a shadow of its former self, its systems barely functioning after years of relentless battle. The once proud Eclipse had been reduced to a wounded animal, but it was humanity's last hope. Captain Celine Hayes stood in the command center, her hands steady on the worm control panel. Her crew had been through hell, but they'd made it this far, fleeing a devastating ambush, surviving countless battles, and clinging to hope when everything seemed lost. The war against the Exarath, an alien force with technological superiority and a cruel, unyielding nature, had taken everything from them. Entire fleets, colonies, even entire star systems. The once vibrant human empire was now a scattered remnant, clinging to life in the shadow of a relentless enemy. "Captain," called Lieutenant Kira Loon, her voice tense, "we've just received a transmission. It's encrypted. It's coming from a human relay station, near the edge of Exarath-controlled space." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "A human relay station? Thought they were all destroyed." "I thought so too," Kyra responded. "But this one is still operational. The encryption, it's unlike anything we've seen before." Without hesitation, Hayes gave the order. "Patch it through." The screen in front of her flickered to life, revealing an unfamiliar face, weathered, older, eyes sharp but haunted. "Captain Hayes, I presume." The man's voice was strained but filled with purpose. "If you're receiving this, then you're the last hope for humanity. You must find the beacon." The words hit Captain Hayes like a punch to the gut. The beacon. It was a myth, a legend that had been passed down from the early days of humanity's exploration of the stars. A device created by an ancient race that could guide ships across vast distances and even alter the course of interstellar wars. It was said to be the key to humanity's rise, a beacon of hope. But that was before the Exarath came, before the galaxy had been torn apart. The beacon had been shattered during the early days of the war, and no one had heard of it since. "What do you mean, find the beacon?" Hayes demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion. "You're saying the beacon still exists?" The man nodded slowly, a grim expression on his face. "Not just exists, Captain. It's in pieces, scattered across the galaxy. But I know where one fragment lies. If you can find it, you can rebuild it. And when that happens, humanity will have a chance to strike back." Hayes glanced around the bridge, her crew tense but listening. The weight of his words sank in. A fragment of the beacon. The last piece of their lost future. It sounded almost too good to be true. But the reality was grim. Without it, humanity would remain scattered, vulnerable, and alone in a galaxy ruled by the Exarath. "Where is it?" she asked, her voice cold with determination. The man on the screen hesitated for a moment before answering. "Deep in Exarath-controlled space, near the edge of the Erilith Nebula. It's a long shot, but it's all we've got left." Captain Hayes took a slow breath, waiting the decision. This was their chance, a glimmer of hope in a galaxy consumed by darkness. But it would be dangerous. The Exarath would stop at nothing to prevent anyone from finding the beacon. They had already destroyed entire fleets, wiped out colonies. This mission would take them into the heart of their enemy's territory, where every star could be their last. But Hayes knew there was no choice. "Set a course for the Erilith Nebula," she ordered, her voice firm. "Prepare for launch. We're going to find the beacon." As the crew scrambled to execute the orders, Hayes felt a fire stir within her chest. For the first time in years, She felt the stirrings of something she thought had been lost. Hope. The Eclipse might be the last ship standing, but it wouldn't go down quietly. They would fight for every inch of ground, every fragment of humanity's future. Kyra, she called as the ship began its slow acceleration. Get that encryption decrypted. I want every scrap of information on that beacon we can find. Aye, Captain, Kyra said, already moving to her station. The ship lurched as it leaped into faster-than-light travel, the stars blurring into streaks of light. The Eclipse was moving forward, into the unknown, into the heart of Serath space, with the last sliver of humanity's future in their hands. But even as they made the jump, Captain Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone in the void. The Exarath were watching, and they would come for them. The Eclipse streaked through the dark expanse of space, its engines firing on all cylinders. Each jump through faster-than-light travel, pushing the ship's fragile hull to its limits. Inside, Captain Hayes stood in the command center, eyes fixed on the glowing star charts before her. The Erlith Nebula loomed ahead, a swirling mass of gas and dust that hid the fragment of the beacon, if the man's message was to be believed. The further they travelled, the more Hayes could feel the weight of their mission pressing down on her. This was no longer about surviving, it was about fighting for a future. Captain. Kyra Loon's voice cut through the silence, her tone urgent. I've decrypted the rest of the transmission. The fragment of the beacon is located on a forgotten station in the outer rim of the nebula, one that Exarath seemed to have left abandoned. But I don't think it's as uninhabited as we were led to believe. Hayes turned sharply to face her officer. Explain. Kyra tapped a few keys on her console. A holographic map of the nebula appeared, showing a sprawling, decaying space station that had once been part of humanity's deep space research outpost. Now it was little more than a rusting skeleton drifting in the void. The station's power core is still active. Someone's been there recently, or they're hiding something. A ripple of unease spread through the bridge, but Hayes steadied herself. Could be the Exarath trying to cover their tracks, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. We'll approach cautiously. Get the team ready for a boarding operation. Just as they neared the nebula's edge, a warning light flashed red on the console. The ship shuddered, throwing crew members off balance. The hull groaned in protest, as if warning them of what lay ahead. Status, Hayes barked, grabbing the railing. Something's jamming our sensors, Kyra answered quickly, eyes scanning her console. We're flying blind through the nebula. I can't get a clear read on the station, and our shields are fluctuating, likely from the radiation storms in the nebula itself. We're not turning back, Hayes said with cold resolve. Get the shields up and keep pushing forward. As the Eclipse maneuvered its way deeper into the dense cloud of cosmic dust and radiation, the crew remained on high alert. Tensions were high, every officer feeling the uncertainty of navigating blind through the cloud, with the looming threat of the Exarath in the back of their minds. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the ship. The station was no longer uninhabited. Eclipse's hull shuddered again, and a stream of alien fire blasted past their shields, striking the side of the ship. Shields are holding, barely, Kyra reported, her voice tense. It's a small force, but it's enough to breach our defenses if we don't respond. Hayes gripped the edge of her command chair, her mind racing. The Exarath had found them, or worse, they were being hunted by something more dangerous. She looked at her crew. Prepare for immediate deployment, she ordered. Arm all teams. We're boarding that station. The Eclipse's crew sprang into action. In the hangar bay, the assault teams suited up, ready to enter the unknown. Captain Hayes, along with a select group of her most trusted officers, would lead the mission. The rest of the crew would remain behind to defend the ship. As the boarding pods detached from the Eclipse, Hayes felt the familiar mix of dread and anticipation. She'd been in situations like this before, overwhelming odds, unknown dangers, but she had to do this for humanity, for the future they might still have. The pods shot through the black void, dodging debris and unpredictable radiation bursts. The station ahead loomed larger with each passing second, its rusted frame sagging under the weight of years of neglect. The eerie silence of the nebula gave the impression of an ancient, abandoned world, but the flickering lights from within the station suggested otherwise. Upon landing, Hayes and her team quickly made their way through the darkened corridors of the station. The air was thick with a metallic scent, and the low hum of unsteady power echoed through the halls. Old control panels blinked with faded displays, some of them shattered or destroyed. But something felt wrong. "Stay sharp," Hayes whispered to her team, her instincts on high alert. The sudden silence on the station was unnerving. The last thing they needed was an ambush. As they reached the main chamber, a strange sight greeted them. A massive, unrecognizable symbol etched into the walls. An alien marking, one that wasn't Exirath. The design was reminiscent of something older, predating even the first human colonies in this sector. "Captain, you need to see this." Kyra's voice crackled over the comms. Hayes approached the console in the center of the chamber. Her eyes scanned the data scrolling on the screen, her heart sinking with each passing moment. "It's not just a station," she muttered. "It's a trap. The beacon fragment is here, but it's been activated, or set to trigger something we don't understand." Before she could react, the floor beneath their feet shook violently. The station's power core, once thought dormant, flared to life. The chamber around them began to hum with energy that felt dangerously familiar. A voice echoed through the dark, distorted but unmistakable. "You've come far, Captain Hayes, but you should not have come here." The Eclipse cruise guns snapped to attention, their fingers twitching at their triggers. Hayes's breath caught in her throat. The station was not abandoned after all. It had been waiting for them. The voice continued to reverberate through the station's corridors, an eerie, distorted tone that seemed to echo in the very walls. "You have awakened us," it said, softer now, but no less chilling. Hayes instinctively reached for her communicator, her voice low and controlled. "Kyra, what's happening on the Eclipse? Are we being attacked?" "Negative, Captain." Kyra's voice crackled back, tense. "But I'm seeing strange energy readings. It's like the whole station's becoming active again. There's a spike in power levels from the core. It's unpredictable." Hayes didn't have time to dwell on the transmission. She gestured to her team, signaling them to advance through the darkened, abandoned station. The air felt colder now, charged with an unnatural hum that sent prickles of unease across her skin. "Stay alert," Hayes ordered. "Weapons at the ready." The team moved forward cautiously, weapons raised. They were in a heavily decayed part of the station now, with exposed piping and electrical wiring snaking through the walls, adding to the decayed atmosphere. But something was wrong. The eerie hum from the power core wasn't the only thing disturbing the silence. As they turned the corner, they saw it, a figure hunched in the shadows. "Identify yourself," Hayes barked, aiming her rifle at the figure. The figure straightened slowly, revealing an old man with wild, unkempt hair and eyes gleaming with intensity. His tattered clothing was a strange mix of old human military garb and pieces of something else, alien materials, worn and altered with time. His face was lined with age and hardship, but his eyes, they were sharp, knowing. "I am Orin," the old man said, his voice a rasp, like the scraping of metal against stone. "And I have been waiting for you, Captain." Hayes narrowed her eyes, lowering her weapon only slightly. "Who are you? And what is this place?" Orin didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached out, grabbing a piece of torn fabric from the wall and holding it in front of her. It was stained with alien symbols, the same ones she had seen earlier in the central chamber. "The beacon isn't just a weapon or a tool for navigation," he continued, his voice growing more urgent. "It's the key to something far older than you realize, something that the Exarath and the Arcane have been fighting over for millennia." The name Arcane hit Hayes like a thunderclap. It was a name from the past, a race that had once been thought extinct, an ancient enemy of the Exarath, wiped out in a conflict that had shaped the course of history. Orin was speaking of things that seemed far beyond even the scope of the war they were fighting now. "You know about the Arcane?" Hayes asked sharply. "How is that possible? They were wiped out long ago." Orin gave a crooked smile, as though he found her ignorance amusing. "Wiped out? No, Captain. They were merely forgotten, hidden. The Arcane aren't extinct. They've been lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to return. And the beacon, the fragments you're collecting, they're their way back." The pieces were starting to fall into place, but Hayes wasn't sure she liked the picture they were forming. What does this have to do with the Exarath? Are they involved with the Arcane? "The Exarath were once a part of the Arcane's empire," Orin said quietly, his gaze flickering to the shadows around them. "Before they betrayed them, the Exarath now believe that the Arcane are a threat to their reign, so they want the beacon for themselves. But the truth is, neither the Exarath nor the Arcane can control it. The power is too great, too unpredictable. The fragments, scattered across the galaxy, are the last remnant of an ancient war, a war that will decide the fate of everything." Hayes stood silent, the weight of his words sinking in. The stakes of the war, the meaning of the beacon, everything had shifted in an instant. This wasn't just about humanity's survival anymore. It was about an ancient, galaxy-shaking conflict that none of them truly understood. "You're saying we're caught in the middle of a war that predates humanity's existence?" Hayes asked, her voice tight with disbelief. Orin nodded grimly. "You've been fighting for survival, Captain. But now you're a part of something much larger. And if you don't understand it, the consequences will be far greater than you can imagine." The sound of the power core thrummed louder now, the energy in the station surging. A sudden crackling noise filled the air, some sort of alarm, and then the voice from before echoed again, but now it was sharper, urgent. "Enough. The time has come." Before Hayes could react, the floor beneath them rumbled violently. A massive metal door slid open, revealing a group of armored figures, Serath soldiers. Their jagged armor gleamed menacingly, and their eyes burned with the cold fire of relentless pursuit. "We've been waiting for you," one of the Exarath soldiers snarled. Orin turned quickly, his voice a harsh whisper. "The Arcane are coming, Captain, and when they do, you'll need allies. The Exarath are just the beginning." The fight was imminent. The old alliances, hidden for so long, were about to come to a head, and humanity was caught in the middle. Hayes could feel the weight of the moment, and with it, the urgency of the mission that had just escalated into something much more dangerous. The sudden appearance of the Exarath soldiers sent a wave of panic through the team. The Eclipse's crew had trained for every scenario, every possible enemy, but the Exarath were in a league of their own. Their sleek, insectoid armor made them nearly impossible to read, their movements swift and deadly. Hayes instinctively raised her rifle, aiming it at the nearest soldier, but Oren's hand shot out, stopping her. "Wait," he hissed, his voice strained. "If you attack, they'll trigger the self-destruct. You won't just lose the station, you'll lose everything." Hayes hesitated, her finger tightening on the trigger. "You're saying we're negotiating with them?" "There's no negotiating with Zerath," Oren spat bitterly. "But there's a deeper game at play here. They're after something specific." The lead Exirath soldier stepped forward, his visor glinting in the dim light. "You have something that belongs to us, human," he hissed, his voice like the sound of grinding metal. "The beacon fragment must be surrendered. Now." Hayes met his cold, alien gaze. "And if I refuse?" The Exirath soldier's head tilted slightly, as though savoring the moment. "Refusal is not an option." Before Hayes could respond, a sharp guttural noise echoed from deeper within the station, an unnatural sound, like the scraping of claws on metal. The soldier's eyes flickered toward the noise, and for a brief moment, the tension in the air shifted. It was as though they were all waiting for something to happen, something neither side could control. Suddenly, the walls of the station seemed to shudder, the lights flickering and dimming. Hayes could feel the ground beneath her feet vibrating, an ominous hum building to a crescendo. The Exirath soldiers stiffened, their helmets shifting as if scanning the surrounding area for the source of the disturbance. They exchanged a few sharp, guttural words, too quick for Hayes to understand. Oren stepped forward, placing himself between the crew and the approaching soldiers. "The arcane have awoken," he muttered, his voice low. "You're not just fighting the Exirath anymore. There's something far worse on the way." The Exirath soldiers backed away, their hands hovering over the weapons at their sides, but they did not advance. Hayes watched, heart racing, as the tension stretched taut. The last thing they needed was for both sides to turn on each other, but it seemed inevitable. Then, without warning, the station's power core surged violently, and the energy throughout the structure spiked. A sudden crackling sound filled the air, followed by a wave of energy that knocked everyone off their feet. Hayes fought to keep her balance, but the surge of energy was too strong. The walls cracked, the floor split open in places, and sparks flew from broken conduits. "Captain, we need to get out of here." Kyra's voice rang through the chaos. The Eclipse team scrambled to their feet, trying to get their bearings amidst the destruction. Hayes fought to regain control of the situation. "Regroup. Fall back to the boarding pods," she shouted, pushing her team into motion. The Exirath soldiers had already begun retreating, their armored forms moving with quick, practiced precision, their focus now completely on the power core. Oren's eyes flicked toward Hayes. "You're being led into a trap. Don't trust them." Hayes hesitated, looking between Oren and the retreating Terath soldiers. The space station was falling apart around them. The hum of the power core grew deafening as it spiraled toward collapse. The whole station was beginning to tear itself apart. The true enemy had yet to show itself, but Hayes felt an undeniable urgency to act before it was too late. "Kyra," Hayes barked, voice steady even in the chaos. "Signal the Eclipse. We need backup now." But just as Kyra was about to respond, a massive explosion shook the station. The power core erupted in a fiery burst of energy, sending shockwaves through the station's structure. The lights went out completely, leaving only the faint glow of emergency lights. The tremors were relentless, throwing everyone off balance. Hayes' breath caught as she saw what the explosion had unleashed. From deep within the bowels of the station, something large and shadowy emerged, a massive, imposing figure, its eyes glowing with an eerie green light. It moved with unnatural speed, its form shrouded in darkness. Its presence felt like a physical force, pushing against the very air. Arcane. Organ breathed in disbelief. I told you, they've returned. The creature's form was humanoid, towering over them all, but its features were twisted and alien. It looked like something ancient, a being far older than the Exarath, and it radiated a power that made the very walls of the station seem to tremble in its presence. The Exarath soldiers, for the first time since their arrival, looked genuinely terrified. This is no longer your fight, humans. The creature's voice rumbled, deep and resonant. It spoke in a language that Hayes didn't recognize, though the tone was unmistakable, threatening, mocking, and full of unearthly power. The Exarath leader stepped forward, his voice filled with barely contained rage. No, we will control the beacon. It belongs to us. But the arcane figure merely smiled, a smile that held no humor. The beacon has been reclaimed. Your time is over. The Exarath soldiers took one last step back, their weapons drawn, but the arcane figure waved its hand dismissively. Without a single movement, the soldiers were thrown back, crashing into the walls with bone-shattering force. The power of the arcane was undeniable. Hayes swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. This was it. The war had escalated. They weren't just fighting for humanity's survival anymore. They were caught in the crossfire of an ancient, galaxy-shattering conflict. And if they didn't act now, everything they had fought for would be destroyed. Fall back, Hayes ordered, her voice commanding. We can't fight this. Get to the pods, now. As the crew began retreating, Hayes spared one last glance at the towering arcane figure, a chill creeping down her spine. The war for the beacon was no longer a matter of survival. It was a fight for the galaxy's very future. The battle in the darkened halls of the Forgotten Station erupted with a force that rattled the bones of the crew. Gizirath soldiers, their jagged black armor gleaming in the dim light, charged forward, their weapons crackling with deadly energy. The Eclipse's assault team opened fire in response, their shots slicing through the air in quick succession. The clang of metal against metal filled the corridor as the two sides clashed. Captain Hayes ducked behind a column of exposed piping, her pulse racing. She had fought in many battles, but this was different, more than just the fight for survival. This was a fight for control over an ancient power that could tip the balance of the galaxy. Move, 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 Hayes shouted, pushing her team forward. The station's energy core hummed ominously, the lights flickering erratically as the power surged. The once abandoned station was now a battleground, and it was clear that Exarath were determined to take whatever secret it held. Orin, the enigmatic old man who had warned them about the arcane, was nowhere to be seen. Hayes' eyes scanned the station, trying to make sense of the chaos. The older man had spoken of the arcane's return, of alliances long forgotten, but there was no time to process any of it now. They had to survive. Kyra, status report. Hayes called over her comms, ducking as another wave of Kirath fire slammed into the wall beside her. We're holding them off, Captain. Kyra responded, her voice steady despite the chaos. But they're everywhere. I'm seeing reinforcements coming from all sides. We're outnumbered. Hayes' mind raced. They couldn't keep fighting indefinitely. The station's layout was disorienting, and every corner seemed to offer more of the enemy. She had to get to the core, to the beacon fragment, before the Exarath overwhelmed them. But there was a larger question now. Who exactly were they fighting for? The Arcane? The Exarath? Or humanity's own future? Hold the line. We're going deeper into the station, Hayes said, her voice firm. Get to the core. If we can disable it, maybe we can stop whatever's coming. Her team acknowledged her orders, pushing forward with determination. They moved cautiously, anticipating the Derath patrols in every shadowed corner. The deeper they went, the more the station's power seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. It wasn't just the hum of a functioning reactor. There was something ancient, something more primal beneath it. As they reached the heart of the station, the air grew thick with tension. At the center of the vast chamber, the beacon fragment lay encased in an energy field. It glowed faintly, its shape jagged, a crystalline object radiating an unfamiliar power. Hayes felt a pull toward it, an instinctive, almost magnetic attraction. But she knew better than to trust instincts in a place like this. As she approached the fragment, Orin appeared again from the shadows, his movements deliberate, his face grim. "The beacon fragment is not what you think it is," Orin said, his voice low and urgent. "It's part of a larger device, something the Arcane built to reshape the galaxy itself. The Exarath want it, but they don't understand its true purpose. If they succeed, they'll remake the galaxy in their image. And the Arcane, if they awaken, they'll wage a war like no one has ever seen before." Hayes' eyes narrowed. "So, what exactly do you want me to do, Orin?" "Destroy it. Take it to the Exarath for safekeeping. We're already caught in the middle of a war, and now you tell me the fate of the galaxy depends on this thing." Orin shook his head, his eyes glinting with urgency. "No, Captain. The beacon can't fall into either side's hands. Not the Exarath, not the Arcane. The only way to stop this war from escalating is to destroy it, before anyone can use it." Before Hayes could respond, a massive explosion rocked the station, sending tremors through the floor. The lights flickered violently, and the hum of the power core grew to an ear-splitting crescendo. The Exarath were close, closer than ever. "We don't have time for this," Hayes said, her voice steely with resolve. "We destroy the beacon. Now." But just as she made the move to disable the power field surrounding the fragment, a new voice, smooth and commanding, echoed throughout the chamber. "Captain Hayes, I wouldn't do that if I were you." Hayes froze. Her hand hovered over the control panel. It was not the Exarath, but something far worse, a voice from a place she couldn't quite place, yet it felt intimately familiar. The voice continued. "The Arcane are already here. You've made your choice, but know this. Destroying the beacon is not just a risk. It's a death sentence. For everyone." Suddenly, the lights in the chamber snapped on, revealing figures emerging from the shadows. They were tall, almost regal in their bearing, their eyes burning with an unsettling intelligence. The Arcane had arrived. "I am Kalos," the lead figure said, his voice both hypnotic and chilling. "And you, Captain, have made the wrong choice." The air in the room grew thick with tension. The Arcane were here. The fate of humanity, and the galaxy itself, was about to be decided. Hayes could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her like 1,000 tons of stone. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about power, ancient and all-consuming. The beacon, and everything it represented, was now the galaxy's most dangerous prize. Kalos, the leader of the Arcane, stood tall in the center of the chamber, his presence radiating an unsettling calm. His features were sharp and regal, as though he were born to rule, not just this station, but the entire galaxy. His eyes burned with an otherworldly light, ancient and all-knowing, and his voice echoed with the certainty of someone who had seen the rise and fall of empires. "You misunderstand, Captain Hayes," Kalos continued, his voice smooth but laced with a deadly edge. "The beacon is not a weapon. It is a key, one that will unlock the future of the galaxy. The Exarath are mere pawns in a game much larger than they understand. They seek power, but they cannot grasp what is truly at stake here. Hayes stood firm, her pulse quickening as the weight of the situation bore down on her. She had expected resistance from the Exarath, but this was different. The Arcane weren't just invaders. They were part of something ancient, something she had only begun to comprehend. And now they were staring her down, their fate entwined with the beacon she had fought so hard to reach. "Then explain it to me, Kalos," Hayes demanded, her voice unwavering despite the uncertainty swirling within her. "What do you want with the beacon? Why does humanity need to be a part of your plans?" Kalos's lips curled into a faint, almost pitying smile. "Humanity is not as insignificant as you believe, Captain. The beacon's power is tied to the very essence of creation itself. It is the foundation of an ancient network, a map of the universe's deepest secrets, its hidden forces. The Arcane understood it long before your species even ventured into the stars. But your race, your ingenuity, your determination, has the potential to unlock that power." Hayes felt a shiver run down her spine. This was more than just a fight for survival. It was a test of humanity's place in a vast, uncaring universe. For all their struggles, humanity had never truly understood the magnitude of what they were up against. "You want to use the beacon to reshape the galaxy?" she asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "To control the very forces that govern the universe? That's madness." Kalos's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. "Madness," he repeated, as if savoring the word. "It is not madness, Captain. It is destiny. The galaxy is a fractured, dying place. The Exarath understand this. They seek to control it through brute force. But only the Arcane can bring true unity by unlocking the secrets hidden within the beacon. Together, we can bring about an era of peace, one where order reigns and chaos is no longer allowed to consume everything." Hayes's mind raced as she processed Kalos's words. An era of peace, or a galaxy ruled by the Arcane's cold, unyielding hand. It was clear that the Arcane were no longer the benevolent race they once were, if they ever had been. The galaxy would bend to their will, or it would be crushed beneath it. "And what about humanity?" Hayes asked, her tone hardening. "Where do we fit into your grand design? Are we to serve your vision, or will we be eradicated like the Exarath if we stand in your way?" A flicker of something almost like regret, crossed Kalos's face before it disappeared behind his mask of control. Humanity is both a key and a test. You'll either embrace the future we offer, or fight against it and doom yourselves. Hayes clenched her fists. She knew what she had to do, but the cost of it weighed heavily on her heart. The Arcane were powerful, ancient, and their ambitions could destroy everything humanity had fought for. The Exarath were still out there, lurking in the shadows, driven by their own twisted desires for control. And the beacon, the key to the galaxy's fate, was now at the center of it all. "We won't surrender," Hayes said, her voice steady but resolute. "Humanity will not bow to anyone, not to you or to the Exarath. We'll fight for our future, even if it means destroying the beacon." Kalos studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he stepped forward. The air around him seemed to shift, thick with power. "You misunderstand the true nature of the beacon, Captain. It cannot be destroyed, not by you, not by anyone. It is beyond your reach, beyond your understanding. The power contained within it is bound to something much larger than the conflict you so desperately cling to. If you truly wish to stop the war, To prevent the galaxy from descending into chaos, you must embrace its potential. Hayes shook her head, her gaze never wavering from Kalos. I'll never let you use it to dominate us. Humanity will find its own path. A low hum filled the chamber as the beacon's energy field pulsed brighter, as though in response to the confrontation unfolding before it. The ground beneath them vibrated, the power within the station threatening to overload. Kalos turned his gaze toward the fragment, his eyes gleaming with purpose. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Captain. The beacon's power will awaken, whether you are ready for it or not. Suddenly, the station groaned ominously. A crackling sound filled the air as the beacon flared to life. The walls of the chamber began to tremble, and the station's lights flickered violently. It was clear that something was about to happen, something beyond their control. We'll see who gets to decide the future of this galaxy, Hayes whispered under her breath, her mind racing. She had to act fast. The station was on the brink of collapse, and the choices they made here would determine the fate of all life in the galaxy. The beacon's power surged, crackling with energy so intense it was almost tangible in the air. Hayes could feel the heat of it against her skin, a pulsing reminder of just how far beyond her understanding this situation had become. The chamber around her seemed to warp with the intensity of the light, the walls bending and shifting as if the very fabric of the station was unraveling. We need to get out of here. Kyra's voice crackled through Hayes's comms, sharp with urgency. The station's unstable. The core's going critical. Hayes didn't take her eyes off Kalos. His expression had turned cold, almost triumphant, as the beacon's energy field flared brighter, its hum becoming deafening. You can't stop it, Captain, Kalos said, his voice a low murmur beneath the overwhelming sound of the power building around them. The arcane are already awakening. The beacon is already responding to the call. You've already set it in motion. We will ascend, and the galaxy will be ours. Hayes clenched her fists, the weight of Kalos's words pressing heavily on her. But she couldn't afford to second-guess herself. Not now. The arcane had made their intentions clear, and if she let them control the beacon, the galaxy would fall under their iron rule. Yet, destroying the beacon, she had no idea what the true consequences would be. Was she condemning humanity to annihilation, or was this the only way to preserve their freedom? Not if I can help it, she muttered under her breath. She reached for her sidearm, her mind racing with possibilities. If the beacon's power was as ancient and dangerous as Kalos suggested, then every moment they lingered here put them closer to disaster. But how could she stop it? She didn't have the power of the arcane, nor did she fully understand the technology they were dealing with. She couldn't destroy it, but perhaps there was a way to contain it. Orin's voice cut through her thoughts, suddenly clear in her earpiece. Captain Hayes, you must trust me. There's a fail-safe hidden within the beacon's core, a last-ditch mechanism left behind by those who created it. If you activate it, you can stop the beacon's power from spreading, but it will require a sacrifice. Hayes's heart skipped a beat. What kind of sacrifice? I can't explain it in full, but you'll need to link your consciousness to the beacon. You'll become the conduit for its energy. It will drain everything from you, Captain, your life, your essence. But it will prevent the arcane from using it. Hayes's breath caught in her throat. She'd always known war required sacrifices, but this? She would give her life to stop the arcane and save humanity from their grasp. But the thought of using the beacon in this way, of giving up everything, was almost too much to bear. I don't have a choice, do I? Hayes said, almost to herself. Orin's voice came back, softer now, almost resigned. No, you don't. But you will save more than just your people. You will prevent the galaxy from falling under the rule of beings who have enslaved entire civilizations. The beacon has already chosen you, Captain. You have been chosen to stop them." Hayes looked around at her team, their faces grim but resolute. She could see the doubt in their eyes, but also the understanding. They had fought together through countless battles, always looking out for one another. And now, here they were, standing on the precipice of something much larger than any conflict they had faced before. The fate of the galaxy rested on her shoulders, and she couldn't back down. She turned back to Kalos, who stood watching her with an almost disappointed look on his face. "You think you can stop this, Captain?" Kalos asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "You cannot. The arcane are already returning. The galaxy will bend to our will, whether you like it or not." "I don't think you understand, Kalos," Hayes said, her voice steady. "I'm not trying to stop you. I'm trying to save the galaxy from you." With a single motion, she turned and sprinted toward the beacon's core, her team following closely behind. The energy in the chamber pulsed stronger with every step, the walls vibrating violently as the power continued to build. "We're not done yet," Hayes said, her voice stronger now. "The future is ours to shape, but we're going to need each other more than ever." Kalos's gaze shifted, his expression unreadable. He had been defeated, but the fight was far from over. The arcane's role in the galaxy had been altered, but their hunger for power would never fade. "You may have won today, Captain Hayes," Kalos said, his voice low. "But the war is far from over. The galaxy is still teetering on the brink, and you are still standing in the way of what must come." Hayes met his gaze squarely, her resolve unwavering. "Then we'll be ready. Humanity will always stand in the way of tyranny." Kalos said nothing more. He turned slowly, his long form disappearing into the shadows of the station. The chamber seemed to grow colder in his absence, as if his presence had been the only thing holding the darkness at bay. Hayes turned back to her crew, her team. Together, they had faced the unknown, fought against an ancient power, and emerged victorious. But the future was uncertain. The galaxy was vast, and the arcane were not the only threat humanity would face. But for the first time in a long time, Hayes felt something she hadn't in a long while. Hope. They had taken a stand. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would not be cowed. And in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The beacon was shattered, but humanity's light had not dimmed. It had only just begun to burn.